Hey everyone and welcome or welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be sharing some summer book recommendations. I actually made a video towards the end of last year where I talked about my favourite autumn and winter books, and I wanted to do a follow-up to that, except that I kind of forgot about spring. But these are all books that I think would be perfect to read over the summer. When I think about books that I personally enjoy reading over the summer, I think about books that make me feel like I've been transported to another place. And so that's kind of what all of these books have in common. They're all books that when I was reading them, I felt like I was immersed, and they're all books where the settings kind of stood out the most to me. I've actually got quite a few different genres on this list. I've got a couple of historical fiction and then a couple that are more contemporary, and then I've also got some romances and some summer thrillers, so a good mix. So hopefully whatever genre you're looking for, there's something on this list. The first book that I wanted to recommend was Malibu Rising by Jenkins. So the reason that I'm recommending this book as a great summer read is because it's set in California in the 1980s, but also the 1950s and 60s, because there's two separate timelines. It basically follows these siblings who are most well known because their father was a famous singer. Every year they have this end of summer party that's attended by all of these rich and famous people. However, you know from the very first chapter that this year, by the end of the night, the house burns down. I actually think that the synopsis for this is a little bit misleading because it makes it sound like it's going to be a mystery, and it's not really. It's very, very character driven. Yeah, when I think about it, there isn't really that much of a plot, but I loved the characters in this, and I just in general love the way that Jenkins Reid writes characters because they feel like real people. One of the main themes within this story is surfing, and this book made me want to learn how to surf. So if you're looking for a book that gives you those beachy vibes, then I would really recommend this one. The next book on my list is One Italian Summer by Rebecca Serle. So I keep wanting to call this book One Last Summer, and that's not what it's called. It's called One Italian Summer. But the reason that I'm recommending this, you can probably guess from the title actually, but my favourite thing about this book was how I felt like I'd been transported to Italy. So most of the book does take place in Postiano, which I've never been to, but I want to visit after reading this book because the setting in this was beautiful. The story basically follows a woman called Katie whose mom Carol has recently passed away, and before Carol passed away, Katie and her mom spoke about going on this trip to Italy because Carol went there when she was around Katie's age and she's always wanted to share this place with her daughter. After her mom passes away, Katie decides to go on this trip anyway because she wants to feel close to her mom. However, not long after she arrives in Italy, she runs into her mom, but a younger version. So it's a contemporary, but it's also got that sci-fi twist, and I liked this one. I didn't like it as much as Rebecca Serle's other book, In 5 Years. If you don't like books that have cheating in them, then there is a kind of element of that within this story. The story is basically about Katie trying to overcome her grief and get to know her mom in Italy and learn what she was like when she was younger, because the Carol that she meets in Italy is very different to the mom that she remembers. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this, mostly if you're looking for like a quick beachy read. The next book on my list is The Four Winds by Kirstin. So this is historical fiction that's set in, I think, the 1930s, around that time, during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl era. It follows a woman called Elsa who lives with her family in Texas, and they are part of this farming community that relies on the land to survive. However, when the Dust Bowl era happens, they end up really struggling, and they're faced with this very difficult decision on whether to wait and hope that the rain comes, or whether they should leave and travel across the country to find a better life elsewhere. I would recommend this more if you're looking for an emotional read, because the tone of this book is very bleak and it's very sad. But I did think that the atmosphere was done really well. It felt very hot and dry, and I felt like I was there with these characters experiencing everything that they were experiencing. I don't think that this is my favourite book by Kirstin. I think I did still prefer The Nightingale, but what I really liked about The Four Winds is that it's set during a part of history that I'd never really learnt about and that I didn't know anything about, and so to me it felt very unique. Okay, so next I'm going to move on to some romances, starting with People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry, or You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry. I don't know why this book has a different title in the UK and the US, but I think in the UK it's called You and Me on Vacation. So this book follows our main character Poppy, who was best friends with this guy called Alex when she was in college, or since she was in college, and every year for about 10 years they would go on holiday together. However, something happened on their last vacation that's meant that they don't speak anymore. So at the start of the book, Poppy is feeling in a bit of a rut, and she realises that the reason for that is because Alex isn't in her life anymore. So she reaches out to him and asks if he wants to go on one final vacation to try and rekindle their friendship. However, because this is a friends to lovers romance, you can probably guess what happens. This is actually my favourite book by Emily Henry, and I was thinking about recommending Beach Read instead because it's there in the title. Beach Read to me is like the perfect beach read because it has more of my favourite tropes. So whereas You and Me on Vacation is friends to lovers and also kind of a second chance romance, Beach Read is rivals to lovers and there's a lot more angst. So I was kind of going back and forth on which I wanted to recommend more. I mean, let's just recommend them both. But I think the You and Me on Vacation is probably the one that I would recommend more for the summer. Actually, no, that's a lie because I would recommend both of these books for the summer. I don't know why I'm getting myself so confused. At the time that I read this, I hadn't been abroad in a really long time, and I really liked that this book made me feel like I was on vacation because the plot is basically about these characters and the holidays that they went on. So there's a timeline in the present day, but then also you have flashbacks to the past when they were going on all of these trips. Even though friends to lovers isn't my favourite trope, I did think that Alex and Poppy's friendship was really sweet and I was rooting for them by the end. There were actually quite a few emotional moments towards the end that almost made me cry. The next romance book on my list is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. So this is one of my favourite romance books that I've read so far this year, and I think if I had to summarise this book with one word, that word would be steamy, because the chemistry between the two main characters was some of the best chemistry I think I've ever read in a romance book. It's also set in New York, which is one of my favourite cities, and it's also about two authors, and I love books that are about books or that are about writing or that are about writers. The two main characters are called Eva and Shane. So Eva is a single mom who's this author of this erotic romance series, whereas Shane writes literary fiction. And there's two timelines, so one in the present day and one in the past. And in the present day, they meet at this literary event and pretend that they don't know each other, but they actually met when they were teenagers, and they had this very brief relationship over 7 days in June, which is the name of the book. Yeah, the story is basically about them trying to reconnect because it's quite clear that they both haven't ever really forgot about each other because they've actually secretly been writing to each other through their books ever since then. One of the main reasons why I sometimes struggle with second chance romances is because if I agree with why a couple broke up in the first place, then I don't want them to get back together and I struggle to root for them. But I didn't find that with this book. I thought it was quite clear in the past timeline timeline that they were just two kids trying to find a connection, whereas in the present day timeline there was a lot more maturity there. And so yeah, like I said, this was so good, and it's one of my favourite romances of the year so far. Okay, so I have one more romance book on my list before I get on to the thrillers, and that romance book is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. This was a very popular book on TikTok last year, and I kind of agree with that hype, but also I don't think I loved this as much as TikTok did. This was like a solid 4 stars for me, so not a new favourite, but it is a book that I enjoyed and that I would recommend for the summer. This is a fake dating situation that's also enemies or rivals to lovers. It basically follows our main character Catalina, who's originally from Spain, but she now lives in New York, and her sister's about to get married. Catalina has told her family that she's going to be bringing her American boyfriend as a +1, but she doesn't have an American boyfriend. She doesn't even have a boyfriend. So she's in a bit of a sticky situation. This guy that she works with, Aaron Blackford, overhears her talking about this predicament, and he invites himself along. He says to her, "I'll be a +1 if you want me to be." But Catalina hates Aaron. So the first half of this book is basically them, I guess, becoming friends. Kind of. The first half of this book wasn't really what I was expecting based on the blurb, and it is a very slow burn. That's the only thing that I will say. But once I got past the halfway point, I flew through the rest, and I did end up really enjoying this one. Okay, so moving on to some thrillers, and the next book on my list is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. So this, to me, felt like the perfect summer thriller because it's set at a summer camp in America. It follows a main character called Emma, who, when she was 13, she went away to this summer camp, and the 3 girls that she was sharing a room with went missing, and no one ever found out what happened to them. In the present day, Emma is now an artist, and she's invited to go back to this summer camp to work as a counsellor. However, when she arrives, Emma can't help but think about what happened back then, and she becomes determined to finally uncover the mystery behind what happened to these girls. My favourite thing about this book was definitely the twists, and I love a thriller like that. I love a thriller that keeps me on the edge of my seat and that keeps me guessing and that has an ending that I am unable to predict. So if you're looking for a book like that, then I would recommend this one. So moving on to the final book on my list, and that is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. So I went into this book with very low expectations because I didn't like The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley, and I thought the guest list was just okay, and I still didn't love this one, but I did like it and I would recommend it. This book follows a woman called Jess whose brother Ben lives in Paris, and she basically invites herself to go and stay with him. However, when she arrives, Ben is actually missing, and Jess has no idea what happened to him, and all of the people that live in this apartment building seem really sketchy, and they seem really avoidant, and they don't want to talk to her. So it's all about her trying to find out what happened to Ben. What I liked about this book was the atmosphere and how there were a few twists that I didn't see coming, and I did really appreciate that. I think of the Lucy Foley books that I've read, this is the one that I think was the most clever. The characters were unlikable, but I think they were meant to be unlikable, so that wasn't really an issue for me. I think the main issue that I had was the pacing, so it is quite slow in the beginning. The ending was also a little underwhelming, and I've just checked on Goodreads, and apparently I gave this a 2.5 stars, but I rounded up to 3 stars. I think I was being a little bit harsh because this book has stuck with me. It stuck with me a lot more than the other Lucy Foley books that I've read. If you like a thriller that has a lot of drama and really messy characters, then I would recommend this one. Also, this is set in Paris, and I wanted to recommend a book that's set in Paris because I'm actually going to Paris next week, or by the time this video goes live, I might already be home. But I wanted to recommend a book that's set in the place where I'm going on holiday this year. So yeah, that does bring me to the end of the video. So thanks for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments if you have any summer book recommendations and if you've read any of the books that are on my list. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and click subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye!